All right, we're live.
We are live. Welcome, everybody, to the weekly roundup for February 23rd, 2024. Kicking it off here with some teacher training talk. I've noticed several of my clients who have been, advertising teacher trainings are saying, like, it's just tanking. Like, I just can't get the people in like I used to. And so that's happened with a couple of my clients. We're looking into it. And the thing that I feel like I've noticed between the ones that are having success getting people in the door and the ones that aren't are also the ones that have like smaller membership numbers. So if you're only looking at the pool of members that you have to draw in those folks into teacher training, it's going to be difficult. Like that's a high ticket item. It's, if you're asking this year after year, maybe there just aren't people in that same community that are willing to or wanting to look into teacher training. So, but we were talking beforehand, and Vicky's observation has been the opposite. She has a client that, is great success even with a smaller membership number. So, Vicky, maybe you can talk to that, like how they found success with their teacher trainings.
Yeah, so they maybe because they kind of started the other way. Teacher trainings have always been really like a really big part of what they do in their business. Um, and focusing on the studio is only something that they've done. Well, the studio's been there, but for like putting more focus onto it has been more recent. So maybe for that reason, I don't know, but they run really successful teacher trainings every year, and but they don't have a big membership at their studio. They don't have a big community, and people are coming. So people are coming from other places to do this teacher training, and it, one of the things before I kind of thought that advertising for your teacher training should be mainly to your community, but now kind of seeing it a different way. And I recently helped them set up a Google ad, which I think is that can potentially be a really good way to advertise the teacher training because it's such so it targets everyone who's searching for being a yoga teacher, how to be a yoga teacher, how to become a yoga teacher, how to be a yoga instructor, like all of those such phrases, and then targeting a bigger area because a teacher training, you don't have to live that close to the studio. You don't have to come to the studio 2 or 3 times a week. I think these guys, that training run over a number of weekends. I think that's probably the most common format these days, isn't it? I mean, either that or an intensive where you go away for a few weeks or some combination of it, but still, you don't have to live in that town. You can target a much wider area. And the question is it anyone else doing that? I don't know. I
Yeah.
personally have never seen uh, an ad showing up to me for
Yeah.
a yoga teacher training. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I'm always, writing and typing in things to do with yoga, but nothing's ever come up. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Vicky. And like what you're saying with advertising, if it is a weekend training, what realistically, the radius. So how far would someone be probably willing to drive? I don't think that, I mean, maybe, it depends, but I don't think if you're doing, a teacher training in, St. Louis, Missouri, that I am in Kettering, Ohio, going to sign up and fly to Missouri for those weekends. However, if you're maybe within a couple of hours, 2, 3 hour distance, um,
yeah,
that so Brown, thinking even outside your city, it's like, yeah, I'd like to get certified. Oh, here's this training in St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, I have a friend that lives there. Oh, I could go, and so maybe thinking outside of your just broadening your, I guess, your geographical radius. And
yeah, I think that's the radius we set up. It was like within like half a day's
yeah,
drive-ish, something like that.
I also wonder too, and I've thought about this for a while, is it overdone? I mean, it's like there are shitloads of YTTs out there. And is it just, and I do know there's a studio here locally. My sister used to, I've been through a couple of times. They do hot. warmish yoga. They don't do any. It's mostly like vinyasa flow. It's not horrible. It's not horrible. The people are nice, although they don't get sick. They don't really want to learn people's names. I can tell you that, and sign up for the intro, and they never reached out to me once. My sister stopped coming. They haven't reached out to her. Anyway, I guess I can digress on that. However, they do teacher trainings like all the flipping time. It's like, seems like every time I turn around, I finally unsubscribed to their emails because their emails drove me crazy. But I think sometimes, are we overdoing it? And then is it because also going to the ad that you're posting or the page that you've created on your website is like, why do I want it? It goes back to, what's the hook? What's the problem? What's the solution? It's just like, oh, I'm doing this YTT. Oh, big deal. So is everybody else in the world. So what is it, starting with, what is it that you're hoping to become? What do you want? Why would people want to do your YTT, particularly when you can do stuff now like 100% online? And I think it comes back to, what is that? Why would, what's it about?
Yeah. I think, and kind of connected to that in a way, is it overdone, or it's everywhere. Also connected is there like a status shift here? Because it's everywhere, and it used to be really cool to be a yoga teacher. I'm not sure if it's as cool as it used to be anymore.
I
don't know. It used to also be very difficult to become a yoga teacher. So I probably told this story before, but I was looking into becoming a yoga teacher in the late 90s. And the only place that I could turn to, and this was the internet, and searching for things wasn't as easy. The only place I could turn to was this international yoga and meditation center in Copenhagen. So, not far away, but it is in a different country. I called them up and they said, yes, to be a yoga teacher, it takes 5 years of full-time study.
Yeah.
I said, is there another way? They said, no. So I said, I don't have that kind of time, so I'm going to have to pass for now.
So I think it does, it's an oversaturation, all of that stuff. And if you still are going to do it, then okay, make it more than, hey, we're just doing this 200 YTT. It's more like, why would you want to do our YTT? Because I do know, I have a client, Stephanie at Red Dragon Yoga. Hi, Stephanie, if you're listening to this. She's doing a YTT right now, and she has developed her own like series, like a lot of people do, right? And so she specifically is training for her Red Dragon series. And so there's still some prestige to that, right? Talking about status kind of thing. So that could be a good thing. It's like, if you created a specific thing, taken a basic flow, and it's like, this is how we do it here. Not unlike, I mean, Stephanie started out like a lot of us have in the YC original OG people in Bikram, and then sort of evolved through that. So sometimes it's like, if you have something really special about your YTT and why it's so special, that can be like, oh, this is interesting. This is different than just this online training that I can do. So what's your differentiator? So when you have market saturation, like we seem all to say, yeah, that's a lot of yoga out there, is what's your market differentiator? And then how are you going to market to that and get people to come to your YTT? And I think it's just like everything. Gone are the days where you can just say, I am having a YTT, and send an email or two, and it fills up. There is some work behind, and I like the idea of doing the Google ads. A lot of people don't think about doing things like Google ads and the like. I was going to say, oh, and the other thing that I would like just to sort of say about a YTT, which I thought is great, something that can be very differentiatable, is that a word? Differentiate yourself from the others out there, is I did last Friday. One of our YC members reached out, and she is doing a a YTT, and it's Bikram, it's 26 and 2. So she's doing a 26 and 2 at her studio. She has 6 people signed up for it. And she contacted us, and I did a 4-hour yoga boot camp sales training with her online. She made it part of her curriculum to talk about yoga as business. And I thought that was brilliant. The participants really got into it, and they were fascinated to understand the business side, the business of yoga. And for those of you who have done any of our trainings with us, know that when we talk about the business of yoga, the business of yoga, what is the most important thing in a yoga practice is breath. Right? That's the first thing. Just breathe. First, you got to learn to breathe. Well, what's the most important thing in a yoga business? Well, that's breath. And what is breath? Well, in a yoga business, breath is money, because you need that. That's the oxygen, the fuel that keeps the business going. And so it was actually very satisfying to do this training with a group of yoga teacher trainees who got it. Now, wouldn't that be pretty fabulous if everybody started incorporating a yoga as business module component to their YTTs, so that when we get these yoga teachers coming out in the world, they understand that part of their job is sales? Wouldn't that be amazing? Mic drop. Come on, team, back me up on this.
It would be amazing. It should be a part of every teacher training. Yeah, it definitely should. That's been my same experience. I also did this for another client studio, and same thing. They loved it. They were really, really interested to listen to all of that. And it seems to be something that's missing in a lot of teacher trainings, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, if you're a studio owner, you're doing coaching already with us, then you have access to, all the things that you learn through our coaching program, which is,
But that doesn't always translate to, like, because I'm thinking of a client of mine who's like has this really good friend and yoga teacher that is now part of her studio, and it's like the studio owner is like, I've told her this is how I want this sales conversation to go, and it's still not happening because it doesn't feel like it was part of, the ethos of the training that she's, or the other studios that she's been part of. So it's kind of hard to sometimes teach an old dog new tricks. So if it was part of the training itself from the beginning, that would be amazing.
I totally agree. It's oftentimes the most challenging, and I know we've talked about this a lot lately, and we promised ourselves we weren't going to go there, but just a little bit of it is I've had a lot of studios, a lot of my clients lately have had staff issues, teacher issues. And in almost every single case, it's with a long-term teacher. It's almost never with a brand new teacher. It always seems to be the long-term teachers that are very entrenched. And when you start making some of these changes, they just will not change. They're just like, and it's like you said, old dog, new tricks kind of thing. So that's where, if you are starting a studio, which we have quite a few people in the YC now that haven't even opened their doors, you are in a brilliant place because you get to set your rules. You get to define your expectation and your rules. I'm going to call them that, rules. There's nothing wrong with the word rules. I don't know where, somewhere in the thing, it got to be where you can't use rules anymore. I don't know it. To set your expectation, your rules, what you want the teachers to be. And here's the thing. I had a little side conversation with someone about this, is just because everybody else in your area does things this way, if you're a new studio owner, why not be the shit disturber and do it the way that you want to do it and the way that makes sense to do it? It's, just because all the yoga studios pay teachers this one way doesn't mean you can't pay differently. It's your business. Just because yoga teachers don't do this thing in this area, so what?
No,
I
completely agree. There's a belief in these rock star yoga teachers, that some teachers have this like magic power of attraction. They are the reason that people come to class. They are the reason that people keep coming to class. And if we didn't have them, we'd be lost. This, like, I think a lot of fear around that as
Oh,
well.
tons of fear. And a good example, I just recently had a client who had a definitely rock star teacher. Classes were full often, you know, her Saturday morning class was full with a wait list practically year round. She was, this studio has 2 locations, so she was one of their core she was a full-time teacher. She taught 12 classes a week between 2 locations. She did some other things for the studio, and she became a Cancer and was no longer buying into or being part of the vision of the studio, and was becoming a detractor from it. And so I give the manager and the owner a lot of credit. They were like, they gave her an opportunity. She wasn't changing. They fired her. And guess what? The sky did not fall. Nobody canceled their membership. And here, and I think I mentioned this several weeks ago, what was also really fascinating was that because she had become cancerous, and the studio with 2 studios had lots of teachers, she had her little cohort of teachers that she would like, right? And she was sort of like the leader instigator. That was one of the, definitely a problem. The rest of her cohort that was left went up to the manager and said, is there anything I need to be doing so that doesn't happen to me? Right? So
That's called keeping people on their toes, isn't it?
yes, it's definitely called people. So if you are in that position where you have a popular teacher that is not really adding value to your community, adding value in terms of being the team player and believing in what your vision is of your studio and how you're running it, and is actively or passively, because there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior out there working against you, don't be afraid to let them go.
So there seems to be almost like 2 different paths to go here. And it ties in a little bit to a couple of videos that Josh posted over the last couple of days about mentoring, like having a mentoring program and a continuing education program for your teachers. So in my mind, it's much to be preferred to start out with some newer teachers and really focus on this feedback, mentorship, continuing education with those teachers to teach them, and really make them be part of your team on a deeper level, rather than relying on these like magic individuals that you might or might not catch to your studio, and relying on them to pull students in. It just seems a better way to go with those people who are maybe less experienced. I mean, in my own studio, I have had some experienced teachers, but I've mostly had newer teachers, many teachers straight out of teacher training. So I would say the majority of my teachers have been straight out of teacher training, straight into my studio, not even really doing any kind of audition class, because I knew them from before. And if it wasn't up to scratch from the beginning, I would work with them to make sure that it got up to scratch. And they have become really popular teachers.
Yeah.
People love their classes. Their classes are full. But they weren't these rock star teachers to start out with. But now they are. And now they're loyal to the studio.
Yeah, I think that whole thing with rock star, I don't even like that phrase, rock star teachers, because I find oftentimes the rock stars are the biggest pains. I would rather have a team of solid performers that show up, do what they're supposed to do, get their class. Maybe their classes aren't always full with wait lists, but they are working towards a common goal at the studio, than have these teachers that come in and are just disturb everything, and just because their classes are full with waitlists. I think for me personally, my opinion is you're better off with that, with just a solid team of teachers that are there lifting everybody up and supporting everybody, which also is interesting when you may talk about mentor teachers, is I know with a lot of the performance-based pay tiers and stuff that talks about mentor teachers and things like that, and paying them. I mean, this other client that I just mentioned that fired this popular teacher, what they do with their mentor teacher level, the people that are in that, what they consider their top tier mentor level pay tier, is not only do they get the top tier pay rate, but they are paid to take the teacher's classes. So it's not just I make this much per class and I'm part of that to get that. And I believe this is actually the right way to do it, is that I'm paid X amount per my class to take class. And then I'm also, as part of this pay, I'm a mentor teacher, and part of it is I have to mentor this however many teachers and take their classes and provide feedback. When I take those teachers' classes, I am paid my teacher rate to take that class and provide the feedback after and work with the teacher.
What, like the per class rate? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yes.
Oh,
So if that
okay.
teacher's making, let's say, $75 to teach their class, right, their own class, and I'm that teacher, I'm paid $75, and Vicki and Carol, you are on my cohort, you are newer teachers, and I am now mentoring you. Every time I take Carol's class or your class, Vicki, I'm getting $75 for that class to take it and then sit with you and provide you feedback. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't you want to do that? To me, that's not a big expense. To me, I'm like, wow, then you have your best teachers. And what it just does is two things, in my mind, accomplishes two things. One, it's taking that top level teacher who does fill their classes, and they are actively involved and coaching and working with your newer teachers, right? And two, you're telling that teacher you value their time.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I think that is like a huge win-win situation. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
It tends to be one of those things that, as an owner, you want to do it yourself, but then there's a million other things. You're grinning here, Carol. Do you recognize this situation?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love this idea because if I had trust enough in a teacher that I loved, Vicky's got to run to yoga. All right. Have a great day. Bye, Vicky. Yeah, of course, I wanted to take everyone's class and give feedback on a regular basis. If you have 10, 12, 15, I have some students with like 25 teachers. That is a ton of time. And as the owner, it's not the best use necessarily of my time. I mean, if there was somebody that was really struggling or a newer teacher, and I wanted to have that first initial like run of trying to get them up to speed, of course, that would be on my radar. But for long term and just sort of checking in and making sure everyone was on the same page, paying somebody in that way that is a rock star teacher would be a huge asset and a great addition to the team. Like just, yeah. So I do love that, that idea, because I think I was just talking to somebody about, or I think it might have been in the network. Somebody was asking about how often do we do reviews and look at pay scale, and move people up and down or whatever, hopefully up, not down. But, it does take time, because part of that is, what are they, look at these tiers. Are they doing the things? And somebody has to take the time to do that. And if it was kind of a constant feedback that was somebody's job, it would be really, I think it would make the morale of the team higher, because it's like everyone's lifting up, ascending to a better teaching, be more professional, etc. So I don't know. I think that's a great idea, and I would have loved to implement something like that.
Yeah. It's the concept of all boats rise with the tide.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and all this is good. And talking about the mentoring teachers and the teachers taking off and giving feedback, equally important is what is the process for that? Right? What is the process for giving the feedback? So when the mentor teacher is giving feedback, there should be a process for it. There should be like a form where the feedback is recorded, and what specifically are they doing when they're reviewing that or giving feedback for that class.
And training on how to give feedback.
Yeah,
Like there's
that's a good
nothing
one.
worse than I've seen people like say, just give feedback to each other. That does not work all the time. In fact, I remember back in the day, like I don't know, there was one teacher that would give feedback and it would make people cry because it just wasn't like, it wasn't constructive.
Yeah.
Josh just did a really great video on how to give feedback and make it very specific, and to have the person say it back to you so
Yeah.
that it's like we are on the same page.
Yeah, that's a
And
good one.
it's like you need to train people sometimes, I think all the time, make sure that they know how to give feedback. That's so important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is true. Is in the beginning, I wasn't so great about giving feedback, and I did make people cry.
I mean, I have to, I'm sorry.
But it's just like, you know, yeah, it's because I really wasn't trained on how to give feedback. And it's true, how to give feedback. And one of the things that my early on mentors talked to me about feedback, which I liked, is like, it just really quick is like after class, what was one thing you really liked about the person's class? Right? What was one thing you noticed that could maybe use some improvement? And then and here's a tool on how to do that. Because that's the other thing, not only making sure the feedback's constructive, but giving the person, okay, well, how do I do that? What can I do to learn how to, use my voice better? Or I mean, like, you need to learn how to use your voice better. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well,
Right?
yes.
I just recently gave feedback at a studio where I was doing it on site. And it was two very, very different teachers. One was like myself, energy super duper duper high. And the other teacher energy was super low. And in both cases, I said I was like and they both are great teachers, longtime teachers. I just said to the teacher that had energy I said, this is where you can start using your voice. So you have great voice. It just tends to be a little bit sometimes monotone. And so looking for where can you bring it up? Conversely, where can you bring it down? All right, thinking about that, because you do have a great voice, right? And then I was like, you're like me. You are up here 90 miles an hour the whole time, learning how to bring it down, right? Again, using your voice. It's not always, in that rah cheerleader kind of voice, right? So learning how to modulate your voice. So those are, instead of just, you learn to, use your voice better. It's like, okay, here are some specific things on how you can do that. And I think that's always important as well. Carol's smiling because she knows this I'm talking about.
Well, and I'm thinking about why, I mean, it might sound like a lot to pay a person to do that's doing feedback their full class amount. But when I'm giving feedback, like my class is not my class.
Right.
If I'm giving feedback, I'm sitting there the whole time thinking about like prioritizing,
Right.
oh, this would be the most impactful thing.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like ranking, okay, this, I could say that. No. So it's not my class anymore. This is work,
It is
right?
work. Yeah, it is work. It's when you're taking a class to give feedback, you can't go into that yoga bliss. You have to be, and I found early on teachers get very nervous when you take notes during
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
This is, what do you think about this? Because I remember those of you who have done IHP training, Inferno Hot Pilates training, know that Gabby will do this, and that we did this when we were in her class, is that we would sit there and observe the class. We would sit in the classroom back against the wall and then be able to just observe the class. I tried that one time and that made the teacher super nervous, and it actually made the students in the room nervous too.
I only remember one time that somebody did that back in the day, like 20 years ago. I never did that with IHP, but I mean, I thought it was a little bit strange, I guess, for
Yeah,
somebody to
yeah.
sit in the back, but I wasn't thinking
I
too
don't know.
much about it.
But yeah, to your point, it is work when you're giving the feedback to the class. And like, so that's where the process comes in. It's like, okay, the teacher has to go in and take the class, like you said, observe it as they're in the moment, right away, then make the notes afterwards, and then sit down and talk with the teacher, get that recorded, and then follow up,
Yeah.
right? It's, and then where does that info get recorded and how is it monitored? And then, okay, so I gave Carol his feedback, and as the mentor teacher, I say I'm going to check back in a month, and then I got a schedule to go take Carol's class in a month, and I got to look and see, okay, this is what we talked about before, review that. I go in, take class. Okay, yes, she has. Now there's this. It's a job.
Mhm.
And I think it's, and keeping in mind too, with mentor teachers like that, it's not like you're paying a double salary for every single class. And even if you're paying someone maybe 2, 3 times a week, and that's making your teachers better, and you're attracting more students to class, and the attendance is better and retention is better, I would say that pays for itself pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had another topic. It's in this realm, but I thought maybe we could transition over
Sure.
to like, what did you do? I'm just curious, Terry. I have a client that is interested in potentially helping some of her I think they work in the studio now, but they're not teachers, but they want to go to teacher training, and the studio owner needs teachers.
Mhm.
So she was like, have you ever paid for somebody to go to teacher training, or is there a contract that they come back and they work it off, or do you have them pay it back? And I mean, I've done it a few different ways. So we talked
That's
about this.
that's
So
a tricky thing, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I I don't like you come back and pay it off and like you're an indentured servant,
no,
right? And I mean, I think if you're going to pay for someone to go to teacher training, you pay for them to go to teacher training. And the expectation is you're going to come back and teach for me, but there's no, like, you're not beholden to me, right? And I just feel, or you give them like a stipend towards it. I did that a couple of times. I said,
yeah,
if you want to go to this, like, particularly with like the IHP training, if you want to go, be great if you want to go. I wanted some more teachers. I will pay $500 towards the training. And they were like, oh, that's great. And that was not like you pay me back. It was just like,
right.
I am going to give you a stipend to help supplement the cost of the training. I
Yes.
mean, if you wanted to do like a full-on scholarship, you could put it out as, okay, I will pay for your training, and then you agree to pay me X amount a month until the training's paid off. Right? It just like, then you got to be prepared for if the person bails on you and you're left. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, I also feel that if someone really passionately wants to do something, they will find a way to pay for it.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
find a way to pay for it.
I think it also goes back to like as an owner, do you need the teacher? Like that's the other side of that too. Like if and you think I think you're kind of gambling a little bit. You think that this person would be a good fit. Do you know for sure? You
Yeah.
know, sometimes it pans out, sometimes I mean, I think every time that we either helped somebody go to training or, worked out a deal, it always did work out,
Mhm.
luckily. But yeah, I think that I love the idea of like, okay, I'm going to give you a stipend or scholarship type of way to get into it. Um, the expectation being, I want you on my schedule when you get back. So I don't know. I was just wondering if there were any other
Oh,
creative ways.
I'm sure there's a lot. Yeah, if you guys have any creative ideas, I think there's, a lot of creative ideas. Like the ones where I paid the stipend, they were already teachers. They were already my teachers. That was one thing. So I knew they were good, because I was started out as Bikram and then I added the IHP. And so I had someone wanting to go. And so so I already knew them. They were already good teachers. So I felt comfortable providing them with that stipend, to help offset that. But like I said, I knew one of my roommates in teacher training, her name was Courtney, and she didn't have 2 dimes to rub together, but and Bikram training back in the day, and still is, one of the most expensive trainings out there. Right. And I think when I went through it, tuition was like $6,000 or almost something. I can't remember now. But she did, like, in the park on Saturdays. Every Saturday she was out there flipping burgers and hot dogs, and people from the studio would come down. She'd go to Costco and she'd do that. Came up with a cute little dress pattern, super simple. She was a seamstress, and she made up all these dresses and she would sell those. And she just got really creative on finding ways to pay for her teacher training. So I do believe that if someone, and I've said this before, if someone is really passionate about something, and just like a membership, people will find a way to pay for it, which is why, kind of a segue to why do most people cancel? They say time and money. I always say that time and money, then you haven't done your job showing the value of the yoga. Because if someone really sees value in their yoga practice, then the money and the time aren't an issue.
Mm-hmm. They make the time. They find
the money. You find the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think really the only real legitimate reasons for cancellation, you're moving. You're out of town, and or a medical thing where you really do need to, not be able, you can't, or for a period of time or something like that. But I mean, feel free to argue. Time and money, I think, are just, you haven't proved the value of the membership. Okay, all right, I will say caveat, if your time commitment does change, maybe your work scheduler, and it's like, okay, then this mini membership, I'm gonna stick around. And I'm gonna sign up, I'm gonna get this mini membership for right now, because I might not be able to come as much as I used to, but I still want to be part of the community. Right. So that's not really a cancellation. That's just, for this point in time right now, I've got a heavy workload, or whatever it is. And I know I'm not going to be able to get in here a couple of times a week, but I still want to get in here. Then I'm going to go to whatever the mini membership is. Right.
Yeah.
So they're just downgrading. They're not canceled.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What else the other thing we were going to talk about, Carol? Forgot now. Oh, that was it. Okay, this came up, and I'm too bad that Vicky's gone, but so opening a studio. As a studio owner, do you have to be a yoga teacher?
It's a good question.
Yeah. Also,
do you have to be a strong yoga teacher? Do you need to have...
Do you have to be a rock star yoga teacher? Do you even have to be a yoga teacher? Do you have to teach in the beginning? I mean, conventional wisdom is, yes, when you open your own studio, you should be teaching on the schedule. However, do you really have to? What do you think?
I mean, it's hard for me to get out of my back in the day mindset, but now, knowing what I know now, I don't think you have to. And I think that, you could find some really great teachers that buy into your vision, and as long as you have, you're preparing yourself with X amount of months of expenses, and you're, prepared in that way, you can pay people to be on your schedule, teach, and have a successful opening without having a certificate yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. And for anyone that wants to be a better teacher, it's like you get to be better by teaching. So, if you're opening a studio and you're teaching 10 classes a week or whatever it is, you will get better at teaching real quick. So that's a concern.
Yes, you will. And I don't know if that's actually a good thing either. I don't think so, because then you get so burnt out.
Right.
And
yes.
And you're spending so much time teaching, you can't do the other things. And then it comes to, well, I can't afford to open unless I teach all the classes. I would say then maybe you should wait a while to open your studio.
Yeah.
Because if you can't, I know, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, or people backlash. I don't know, but if you plan to open a yoga studio and you can't afford to pay teachers and you're teaching all the classes, right out the gate, you have put yourself in a precarious financial situation. And it's going to catch up with you real soon. I mean, what do you think, Carol?
Yeah. I mean, thinking back when we opened our studio, I was like 25 years old. I could teach all day, every day. Like if you have that stamina and you don't have, let's say, a family or commitments outside of the studio, and that's the way you can roll to start, maybe, but you cannot live that way for long term. Like you have to have a plan um, to grow and ascend to a higher level of like the visionary, of the studio, so that it can't remain that way for sure.
Plus, it's not good for the students either.
No, no.
Because
And I sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying, because then if you're the only teacher, I'm sorry, I don't care how good you are, that's boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what if you don't resonate? That's the other thing,
Right.
is what if your style, however you teach, doesn't resonate with people and they come in like, ugh, I don't like that. And that I'm the only option. That's not a good thing either, because that's the beauty of having multiple teachers is, well, Terry's not my favorite teacher, but there are other teachers I really like.
Mhm.
If only Terry's on the schedule, then maybe I'm going to go someplace else.
Well, and this actually came up on a call recently where if you are, teaching the majority and it's like the Carol show and this is Carol's business, and, then pulling yourself outside of it and making it its own thing. Like, I know that for a moment it felt like if I stepped away, then the business was going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's not the way to run a studio either, right?
Yeah.
So you can't, there's something being tied up in all of the classes too, even if it's great and people are coming, you cannot, one, sustain it, and two,
Yeah.
really grow the business with you teaching, a ton of the classes. So you have to figure out how to remove yourself from being the center of the show.
Yeah.
And really promote your other teachers and
Yep.
why they're great and why the yoga works. And it might not even have anything to do with the teacher. This
Yeah.
is the yoga, the program, the classes that you've chosen to put on your schedule work together in this way for this reason. So
Yeah.
it's not even about the teachers.
Well, way back, it's like there was this whole thing about you don't even put the teacher's name on the schedule.
Mhm.
You just book the class for the time. It's not about the teachers, about the yoga.
Yeah.
So it goes back. So just sort of circling back to that, do you have to be a yoga teacher? No, you don't. And I do. I have a very good friend who owns a studio down in Florida, and she loved yoga. Yoga helped her, and she wanted to provide yoga to her community, and she wasn't a teacher. So she opened a studio, and it's successful, it's thriving. I think she finally did get her, or was working on a 200-hour YTT. But I don't think she's still teaching on her own schedule, and it's a growing, thriving community. So the answer to that is you can set it up however you want to set it up. It's just that you have to have a plan for it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is you just need to have a plan. And not getting to, I remember there was this is back in the day. I always go back to that. Back in the day, there was a Bikram yoga studio in the East, and the owner taught 32 classes a week.
Oh yeah.
90-minute Bikram yoga, 32 classes a week for like years.
Mhm.
It was just like insane.
Yes.
I'm like,
I know similar situations.
so yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't know. That's wild.
Yeah.
What else?
I don't know. I have to actually bounce here in a minute because I'm going to teach a class. I don't usually get to teach on Fridays, but I
Oh,
am excited to go teach today.
okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm doing I have a little time, but I'm doing at noon today, well, noon East Coast time. I'm doing a 2-hour sales training, virtual sales training with one of my clients. on first visit flow and flipping resistance. So that's going to be super fun. I always like to do those.
A
Well,
good one.
post below. What do you think? Do you have to be a yoga teacher to own a yoga studio? What do you think about paying your teachers to be mentor teachers? How training to give feedback? Do you do any of these things? What's your process? And we're kind of going just finish up because you said how often should you give reviews? Because someone did post about that. I did quarterly reviews. I reviewed, and I had a mentor teacher. I called her my teacher liaison who did them. And so we did quarterly reviews with the teacher. She did a quarterly review with the teacher. That's just because back in my corporate days, we got quarterly reviews and then an annual review. The thing about reviews is you should do them. You have a cadence and then go with it. If you think quarterly is too much, then maybe 3 times a year or even biannually, twice a year. But you should be doing them. Don't you feel, Carol, that it's important to read, not just your teachers? You should do reviews, performance reviews with everybody in your organization, like your front desk staff, whoever works for you. Social media person, anybody who holds a seat on your bus to help drive your business should be reviewed.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it can feel a little bit overwhelming if you don't have processes in place.
Yeah.
And, so if you need help with that, we're here for you.
We can hook you up.
But yeah, definitely. It's an important part of running a business.
Yes, it's the human issues can oftentimes become the biggest issues in your business. So you want to make sure that you do have the processes in place, not only for fairness and equity and all that stuff, but to protect yourself in the event of an unruly employee, something that goes sideways, so that you have the processes in place to deal with that. Ergo, you've got a teacher that you don't know how to get rid of. Right. And so unfortunately, that's the side of being an entrepreneur that sucks. It's hard. It's really hard. It's the hardest dealing with people. It's really the hardest thing. So the better processes you have, the better prepared you are, the better, not easier, but the better those hard conversations are going to go, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And always trust your gut.
100%.
Yeah. Because I think you even said at one time, Carol, that if your gut is telling you something in an interview before that you've even hired that person, didn't you say you overread? Was it you or maybe I'm thinking of somebody else?
It might be somebody else that doesn't resonate.
Somebody I spoke at some time here, it's like her gut was sort of like, oh, not really sure about this person, but really needed a teacher. And so was like kind of downplayed it and said, oh, and then 6 months later, and she's like, I should have listened to my gut. And I one time had a professional HR person, someone real high up in the company I used to work for, that said, when you're doing an interview, studies show you make the decision within the first couple of minutes. If it's an hour interview, and then you spend the rest of the hour either confirming your first or coming up with a compelling reason to overwrite it.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that, actually.
Usually people make that, whether they know it or not, intuitively we know like yes or no, and then we spend the rest of the interview confirming or denying that what our gut is telling us. So yeah, so trust your gut in hiring. And then if your gut is telling you that this person is a detractor to your business, surgically cut it out. If you just let it go, it's just going to fester and get worse and worse. Yeah. So yes, go do some yoga, have a great weekend. Although, as the Lady Dowager Countess Grantham would say, weekend. Once weekend. All right, YC. Hey, again, thank you everybody who's listening. Again, post your comments below. If you're don't have a coach and you just like to talk about any of the things we talk about, you can always book coaching calls with us. We're putting together the final details for the annual Visionary Summit happening in Mexico this year. So stay tuned for that. We've got some exciting things happening with that. And we've mentioned a couple of times the yoga sales boot camps. We mentioned our new product, which for right now we're just kind of calling staff management boot camp. We do still have some spots for those openings. So if you'd like to bring us a team to your studio to work on these specific things, either around staff or around sales, reach out to us. We do have some spots left this year, and it can be and has been for most of the studios we go to. It is a studio transforming process. So it's like having those outside eyes come in, people coming in and looking and observing is often a way you can break through, because we kind of get, it's always good to have that fresh perspective. So let us know if we're here to support you. We're here to help you have a thriving yoga business. And remember, you shouldn't be suffering for your service. All right, go do some yoga. Big love to everybody. Have a beautiful